You know, we live in a world that is just overflowing with data. And because of that, we all crave certainty. We want that one perfect number, that single definitive answer to tell us exactly what's going on. But what if that obsession with precision is actually holding us back?
I mean, it seems totally obvious, right? The more information you gather, the clearer the picture should get. But is that always true? Could it be that sometimes more data just shines a brighter light on what we don't know?
All right, take a look at this. These graphs show predictions we're trying to make from data. The one on the left uses 100 data points, and that shaded area, that's our uncertainty. It's pretty wide. Now, the one on the right uses 10 times more data, 1,000 points. And yeah, our uncertainty shrinks, we feel way more confident. But look really closely at that one spot right in the middle. Even with 10 times the data, there's a total blind spot. The kind of data we're collecting, no matter how much we get, it literally can't tell us a single thing about what's happening right there. So this isn't some statistical weirdness that'll go away if we just collect more data. No, this is a totally different kind of problem. It's a fundamental gap in our knowledge, a place where the data itself is just silent. And this whole issue actually has a name. This is what economists and statisticians call the identification problem. And it's basically the challenge of figuring out the true cause and effect story when the data you have could fit a bunch of different competing stories. And let's be super clear about what this means. This isn't about having a small sample size. The whole idea of the identification problem is that even if you had, like a godlike view, an infinite amount of data, you still couldn't be sure what's really going on. The data alone just isn't enough to tell you. To make this feel a little more real, let's talk about something called the reflection problem, which was described by the economist Charles Mansky. It is a classic example of an identification problem from social science. So let's say you notice that all the teenagers in a certain friend group tend to listen to the same kind of music. Why is that? Well, the data just shows you that they're similar. It doesn't tell you the why. Is it peer pressure, an endogenous effect where they all conform? Or is it because the group is mostly made up of kids from similar backgrounds? That's a contextual effect. Or maybe they were all just the kinds of people who liked that music before they even became friends, a correlated effect. Just looking at who listens to what won't by itself tell you which of these stories is the right one. And this puts researchers, and really all of us who rely on their work, in a really tough spot. See, to get a single, neat answer from data that's ambiguous, you have to start making assumptions. And that leads to a huge dilemma. Mansky actually calls this the law of decreasing credibility. And you can think of it like this. The more you have to assume things to force your data to tell one simple story, the less believable that story actually becomes. It's a direct trade-off. This slide just lays out the choice perfectly. On one side, you can make really strong, heroic assumptions, like you just decide to assume away 2 of those 3 reasons for why the teens listen to the same music. If you do that, you'll get a very precise single number as an answer, but that conclusion is incredibly fragile. If your big assumption is even a tiny bit wrong, your whole answer just crumbles. Or you can make weak, really believable assumptions. Your conclusion will be more ambiguous, it'll be a range instead of a single number, but it will be super credible and solid. And that's the big question, isn't it? We can't just throw our hands up and say, well, I guess we don't know. We have to find a way to pull useful, reliable information from our data, even if it can't be perfectly precise. And the solution is to actually embrace the ambiguity. Instead of trying to force the data to give us a single answer, we can use this technique called partial identification to find the range of possible answers that are all consistent with the data. It's all about figuring out what we can know with real confidence. I know this all might sound a little bit abstract, so let's walk through a really powerful, real-world example. It comes from a study by Pilyavin and Sosin on people experiencing homelessness. They wanted to know what percentage of people successfully exited homelessness over a 6-month period. But they ran into a really common problem: missing data. Okay, so here are the numbers for the men in the study. They started with a sample of 106 men. 6 months later, they could only find and re-interview 64 of them. Now, of those 64, they found that 21 had exited homelessness. But here's the million-dollar question. What happened to the other 42 men they couldn't find? Just guessing what happened to them would be a strong, fragile assumption. So let's not assume anything. So how do we handle this without just making stuff up? Well, you calculate the absolute best and worst case scenarios. Let's start with the worst case. That means none of the 42 missing men exited homelessness. That gives us 21 successful exits out of the total 106 men.
Now, the best case? Well, that would mean all 42 of the missing men exited, giving us 21 plus 42 successful exits. The true, real-world answer has to be somewhere between these two extremes. It's just logic.
And that gives us our result. The true probability that a man in this group exited homelessness is somewhere between 20% and 59%. Now, this isn't a statement of statistical uncertainty, it's a statement of logical certainty. Mansky calls it the domain of consensus, because any researcher, no matter what they personally believe about that missing data, has to agree that the true answer lies somewhere in this range. It's an honest answer.
Okay, so what does all this mean for you, when you're not a statistician? Well, it means changing the way we think about the facts and figures we see every single day.
There's this famous maybe true story about President Lyndon B. Johnson. When one of his economists gave him a forecast as a range, he supposedly shot back, "Ranges are for cattle. Give me a number." And that just perfectly captures our society's hunger for simple, definitive answers. We want the number. But as we've just seen, that demand for a single number is often what forces people to make fragile, hidden assumptions in the first place.
So here's your new toolkit for critical thinking. From now on, when you see a news headline with some shockingly precise statistic, be a little skeptical. Ask yourself, what aren't they telling me? What assumptions do they have to make to get that one clean number? Always remember that an honest range is so much better than a precise number that might be completely wrong. This is your new lens for looking at everything from scientific studies to political promises.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. In our search for knowledge, what are we actually looking for? Is it the illusion of certainty? Or is it an honest account of what we can truly know? The answer just might change how you see the world.